Join us as we dive into the history, hauntings, and high strangeness of the world to try to better understand the paranormal. I will be your guide. I am paranormal researcher and investigator Eric Freeman Sims. Welcome to the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Unseen Paranormal. Eric here as usual. And today I want to get back into the mental health stuff and talk about your self-esteem and self-worth. And, you know, how that all of us, we all struggle, me included. I'm not excluding myself from this, and I don't claim to know everything. This is just my opinion on it. And the things that I try to work on every day to make sure that I'm not using what other people think of me to boost my self-worth. Just make sure that I know that I am worthy and that because I strive every day to be a good person. And one of my mottos I always tell all my friends and all I try to subscribe to every day is the only person going to make you happy is you. It's the decisions that you make in your life and make for yourself. And those can be little tiny decisions. They don't have to be big decisions, but even like the little small decisions, you can make the decision when you wake up in the morning that I'm going to be happy today. I'm going to have a good day and nothing's going to bother me. And if you keep that mindset, you'll have a pretty good day. You know, shit's going to happen that you don't like. Shit's going to happen that none of us, you know, plan for. But at the end of the day, you still got to deal with it and move on with your life. And so I try not to let those little things bring me down because there's always going to be adversity and there's always going to be things in your way. And you can either be pissed off at all the little things in life and miserable and choose to be miserable. And that's your choice because you are the master of your own brain. And if you want to change your thinking, you will. And so if you're down all the time and down on everybody and down on yourself, then that's what your life's going to be. You're going to be fucking miserable. And I just realized a long time ago that I'm going to get up every day in a good mood and I'm going to not let anybody fuck that mood up. Because if you let another person do that, you're giving them the power to do that over you. You're giving them power over you to fuck up your day and your mood. And if you just let shit roll off, especially inconsequential shit, just roll off your back and just go on about your day. And there's also things that happen in life that we have no control over. And it's frustrating sometimes to get other people to do what the fuck you want them to do. And you just can't. In relationships, friendships, you know, anything like that. Your kids, you know, it's just fucking frustrating. But, and that's where, like we were talking about before, where taking a break comes in. Like you need time for yourself as well to decompress from all that. But I firmly believe, and I'm not trying to be like kumbaya, let's sit around the fire bullshit, but I firmly believe that what you believe in your head is what you tell yourself every day, and what you believe in your mind is what your life will be. And stop letting other people choose your happiness, and stop looking at people on fucking Facebook and on Instagram and their lives look perfect because they put up all these perfect pictures of their perfect family and their perfect spouse and perfect children, and their lives aren't perfect. I promise you. That is just a fucking front they put up because they're miserable and they want everybody else to think that they just have this perfect life and they're rich and they're taking these beach trips all the time. That's not normally how it is. I mean, we should have learned this from these fucking celebrities who've, you know, taken pictures in front of private jets and then find out they're flying commercial. I mean, it's shit like that. People are always trying to put on a front to show up other people. And that's why I think one of the biggest things in this world we need to get rid of is fucking ego. You know, I love performing in front of people and stuff. And back when I was younger, I had an ego. And the more that people clapped for me when I sang in front of them, you know, the happier I was. But I let that define my self-worth. And now that I've gotten older, that doesn't work for me. I don't need to put on a fucking dog and pony show every day for me to feel good about me. And I have my issues like everybody else. I have weight issues, had my entire life. I've been honest about that on social media. I've gone up, I've gone down, you know, but hey, I'm fucking healthy and I'm happy that I get to do this for y'all. And I have nothing to fucking complain about. I really don't. At the end of the day, I had to tell myself to shut the fuck up if I start complaining because I have nothing to complain about. I have a good life. And not saying I don't have my own problems. I have my own fucking issues. That's why I come in here and talk to y'all about my issues. I'm not a perfect person. I'm a fucking weirdo because I do the paranormal. But, you know, we're all weird in our own way, and that's why we all come together on stuff like the paranormal to celebrate our weirdness and all that. And so, you know, stop being so hard on yourself and stop comparing yourself to other people and what their lives appear to be, because they have just as many problems as you do. They just don't want you to see that they're struggling when they really are. And then also comes back to what we've talked about before. Be careful what you say to somebody, because you never know how it's going to affect them. And so if you always lead your life with good intentions and doing good things, no matter what other people do, you may affect somebody's life in a very positive way just because you were nice to them, or that you said something like, or you held the door open for them at a grocery store or something, a gas station or something. That may mean the world to them, and so, always just try to have a positive attitude. I don't, like I said, it sounds like kumbaya bullshit, hippy dippy bullshit, but I promise you, if you change your thinking, it'll, you change that attitude in the way that you think, your brain will follow. It might take a little while, but your brain will follow. But just remember, the only person ever going to make you happy is you. And if what you're doing now is not making you happy, then find a way to change it. But that's my opinion, my advice for the day. I struggle every day with everything that I just told you. And some days it's easier than others. Some days it's harder than others. But and like I said, I don't know everything. I'm just trying to share with you all the things that I've learned and things I struggle with. Anyway, that's enough of the mental health talk for this week. And please go and subscribe to Strangely Haunted on YouTube. We've got a new documentary film coming out. This one's going to be a full-length one on Brushy Mountain. We have the trailer for Brushy Mountain up now. Brushy Mountain State Prison. It's a prison here in Tennessee that we went and investigated, and has a really long history and crazy, weird, interesting history. But that will be out in this, probably coming this fall. Full-length documentary, and we'll have more on that when it comes out. But anyway, so on today's show, we have an author for you and a paranormal investigator. His name is Michael J. Oka. That is O-K-A. And he is the author of the new book, The West Grand Haunting. And we're talking to him about his new book and where he grows up in a haunted house and how it affected his life and it influenced him to become a paranormal investigator. And now him and his team do private investigations only and help families just like his when he was growing up in the 80s and when they didn't have any help. And he's a really smart, articulate guy. And we had a great conversation, really enjoyed the conversation about the book and him growing up in this haunted house, but also his thoughts on investigations and the paranormal. So sit back and relax and enjoy this episode with Michael J. Oka. And you can find his books and all his links in the show notes as usual. All right. We'll talk to y'all next time. Have a good day. Hey, Michael, thanks for joining the show and coming on and talking about your book today.
Hey, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I come across your book on Amazon, and it just came out in April, so not that long ago. And this is the book is called The West Grand Haunting, and this is basically kind of an autobiographical story, nonfiction about you and your family's experiences moving into a haunted house.
Yeah, that's right. Over in our house in Corona.
So after all these years, you're about my age. We're both in our 40s. And so what kind of spurred you to write the book now as opposed to before or not write the book at all?
I'd attempted to write this book at least 4 or 5 times prior to getting what I think is the correct version done. And each and every time I had failed. I couldn't figure out what it was that the book was missing. Couple summers back, a partner of mine from work and we got into doing some paranormal investigation. And one of the things we were doing when we were talking to the other people in our group was going over why we believe. And we were sharing our stories, and this one popped up. And after the summer was done, the group kind of went dormant again. And I was sitting there one day, and I just thought, I can write this. And then I started getting to it.
So did this kind of spur you into doing more paranormal stuff or becoming an investigator or anything like that?
It's a bit cyclical. It's because of the events that happened on the West Grand Haunting, the real life, not just the story, but the things I experienced kind of set me in that direction, I guess, forever. It was an indelible mark put on my life. And, when you're a kid, there's not much you can really do other than reading books on it and kind of being a fan of the idea of the paranormal. And then after the events of the West Grand Haunting, the book illustrates at one point, that a friend of mine and I went back there and we had an experience and met up with a couple other people, and we kind of formed a paranormal group. and that went on for a while, and then it went dormant. And more recently, after having written the story, I started getting back into the paranormal again.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated because all of us in the paranormal world kind of have similar reasoning for getting into it. A lot of us have, experiences from our childhood, and we're trying to explain them to ourselves or rationalize that we're not crazy for having them.
Absolutely right. It's rationale, trying to rationalize them. Sorry, it's trying to justify the experience. It's trying to prove to yourself, number one, hey, that did happen. But as it goes so often with the paranormal, it's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but very little in the realm of hard evidence. I can
Yeah.
see something and say something, and everyone thinks it's a cool ghost story, but did it really happen? Even with my book, I commented on that. I'm telling you a story here. I'm telling you this happened, but I can't prove it.
Right.
No one else was there to see it with us. So, it becomes a lifelong pursuit for me.
Yeah, and that's kind of how it's been for me as well. With growing up paranormal in a paranormal household and things like that as well. Not to the extent that you experienced it, or even as young as you started experiencing it. And also, saying that we both grew up in an era where you had In Search Of and like Unsolved Mysteries. You even talk about Unsolved Mysteries in the book, kind of putting its mark on
Queen
you.
Mary episode.
Yeah, the one episode kind of putting its mark on you. But those are the only things that we had. We didn't have ghost hunters and things like that. Like a lot of the kids now who are grown, grew up watching that in the early 2000s. And so, we didn't, I think even me looking at the book and the way you describe everything, I kind of felt a connection with you as a younger kid of being aware of these things, but not as aware, I think, as society is now when the kids are growing up with ghost adventures and ghost hunters and all these TV shows and how predominant it is in our society. When we were growing up, it wasn't that predominant.
It really wasn't. And, as a kid, everybody had the ghost story, but it was, I don't want to say it was tongue in cheek, but it was one of those things, someone says and you accept it, but you don't discuss it in detail. I certainly didn't. Until I'd written The West Grand Haunting. These were not things I would tell someone in detail because it's fun around the campfire, it's fun at sleepovers, but when you talk about it seriously, people start side-eyeing like, all right, man, that's a little kooky that you believe that.
Yeah, and probably in the, if we were born 10 years earlier, instead of the 80s, back in the 70s, I mean, they'd put you in a nut house for seeing things. You'd be put in a mental institution. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And that was something I noted as well. They would look at that as something crazy. And not to divert too far off topic, but in some of my career history, one of them I had to take the MMPI-2 test, and the questions in there include things like, have you ever seen ghosts? Do you see close? And this is a psychological evaluation test, and
yeah,
obviously, if you want the job, you're like, no, there's no such thing. But
right.
Because you want the job, and in order to get it, you can't be someone who sees ghosts or who has had experiences that you believe really happened, because, like you said, if it had come these experiences, a lot earlier on in our lives, there were institutions and psychologists and psychiatrists for things like this.
Yeah, so let's get into the book and kind of start in the beginning with how y'all came to move into this house to begin with.
Oh man, I was a kid. I grew up a relatively normal lifestyle. My dad worked for McDonnell Douglas. My mom was a waitress in Lawndale, California, a place called the Seafair. And then, oh gosh, I don't know, probably about 1987. We get the news, the horrible news. Hey, we're going to take some time apart, and that's never good. And it struck me pretty hard. We moved out of Lawndale and into Orange County in this place called La Habra. And I spent my life there with my mom and my sister from 87 to 89. And around 89, my dad started popping up again. And we ended up taking a family trip to this city called Norco, California. My aunt Denise lived there at the time. She was a rancher. And Norco's just north of Corona. And we liked it, and we liked Corona. So within a few months, really, it happened pretty quickly. Within a few months, I've got my family back, and we're moving into this gorgeous American Craftsman house on West Grand. And I mean, it was big. It had an enormous backyard, orange trees, pomegranates, big garage, and this root cellar. and we were just thrilled to be there and be a family. But it was almost immediate that things there started happening. It didn't wait too long.
Yeah. Yeah. And you kind of describe it in the book as the house waking up.
When you're a kid, you can't describe these feelings, or at least you can't put them in the words so well or articulate it so much. But looking back on the memories, it's exactly what the house felt like. It's like this place, we walked in, there was nothing. It felt very dormant, looking back on it. And then one day it was like being in a crowded cafeteria. It's a lot of background noise, and there's a lot of energy in there, and you don't really know what it is. But it was loud, for lack of a better word. The house was very loud.
Yeah, yeah. And so how did it start? Because you said at first it was kind of dormant and kind of quiet, and then all of a sudden it just woke up. So what was kind of the first beginnings of you, at least you and your sister, noticing it as kids?
Well, when we first moved in there, a lot of our packed belongings ended up in the root cellar beneath the house, and the root cellar wasn't like there was no concrete. This wasn't something that someone had put a lot of care into building. It was more like somebody had dug out a hole beneath the house, and there was the cellar, and it was about the length and width of the house almost beneath, and it was very deep. And we used to be allowed to play there, and then one day, for no good reason that I can imagine, other than maybe safety concerns of a parent, my mom tells us that we can't go down there anymore, not without an adult, not ever. And there was a slide latch and lock, but they never locked it. So my sister and I got home from school one day. Mom was getting ready to go to work. Dad was going to be home soon. And while Mom stepped out for a moment, we decided we were going to go into the root cellar. We were going to go down there, play with some of our old toys from our life back in Lawndale, and prior to their first split. And while we were down there, we heard a sound that honestly couldn't be mistaken for anything else than footsteps. And we had our dog Stormy. He was this beautiful, just energetic black lab. He was very playful, very protective. We had him down there with us because we rationalized, well, he's older than us, kind of, and he'll protect us. So we brought him down there, and we start hearing these footsteps, and I know it's not my mom, and I know it's not my dad. But I start rationalizing myself. Oh, shoot, Dad's home. Oh no. But Stormy's whimpering, and Stormy's wrapping around up into a little ball on the floor of the root cellar. And I don't think that I put that in there. There was a lot of stuff that I had to take out, mostly because it kind of detracted from the story.
Yeah.
But he was a good indicator. When these things started happening, that there was something that made him uncomfortable, and it was something that should have, if we weren't, made us uncomfortable as well. And so we come rushing out of the root cellar, hell or high water, up the back stairs and into the kitchen, into the house, and no one's home. And these were deliberate footsteps. They weren't like, oh, the house is settling, or something fell down upstairs. It was, you can hear it walking from one location of the house into the hall and where the bathroom would be. And when we got up there was no one there, no one at all. That was when the house woke up.
Yeah. And then it kind of snowballed from there into a lot more things happening.
It did. It really did. Things would go by kind of peaceably for a little bit in between. It wasn't like, we lived in a horror movie where no matter where we turned, there was something horrific awaiting us next. But it was never comfortable for me again after that. And my sister as well. It played off of anxiety, and it scared us. We went from being able to sleep, with a door shut, to having our door open and the hall light on. And inexplicably, there was no reason. There were spots of the house. Sometimes they were uncomfortable to be in for no good reason at all. But, we had just moved in there. Mom and Dad had just gotten back together. Things were good for a little while. So it wasn't like we were waiting for something bad to happen. It was just that there was something in the background noise, that proverbial cafeteria that was building, that we couldn't explain.
Yeah, yeah. And you had a really crazy experience waking up with somebody standing behind the door.
The woman behind the door, I didn't wake up because I hadn't gone to sleep. I have a very active imagination, for sure. I write, and my mind goes to some dark places sometimes. And as a kid, mom had a rule that I can't watch anything scary before bed, because that's just where my mind will take it. And It was that one fateful episode of Unsolved Mysteries for the episode of the Queen Mary. My dad and I watched it. We palled around a bit, and when it was time for me to go to bed, I was settling in the bed. He closed the door halfway. A whole light was on. And we would have this radio on. It was a little dial radio. You turn the knob and the needle goes left or right. And they always kept it on something like baseball or boring talk radio because I needed background noise to fall asleep. And as I'm getting ready to, kind of shuffle off into slumber, I heard the radio's station get kind of staticky. And we kind of disregarded it at first, but then I heard the station change. And it wasn't on baseball anymore. It was on something else. I can't tell you exactly what it was, and then it was static again, and then it was something else. And I'm a little bit unnerved, if I'm being honest, the Unsolved Mysteries and everything. But I leaned out of bed and I put my left hand on the floor and reached over to the bottom shelf of this bookshelf where this little radio was. And I was turning it back to the center dial so it could go to the baseball station. And as I was about to get back in the bed, I half saw, half sensed movement out of my peripheral vision. And when I looked up, in the corner, sitting, not standing, sitting on the floor, kind of bundled up into itself, there was a woman. And I immediately went into survival mode. I started lying to myself, trying to convince myself, okay, this is my sister playing a trick on me. And it's not that it was ever beyond her to do something like that. It's just that I had to convince myself that this was her. So I'm telling her, stop it. I'm going to tell Dad, you're being stupid. You're being stupid. Stop it.
Yeah.
And it looked up. It was kind of cradled there looking at the floor. And when it looked up, it was this kind of emaciated, rotting looking person. And I'd never really seen one before, but I did include an illustration in the book, hollow cavernous eyes, or where orbital sockets where the eyes should have been. And my reaction was to scream as loud and shrill as possible. And about that time, my mom was coming in through the front door, and my dad was already in bed, but all the lights are on in the house. Mom and Dad are running into my room. There's the woman behind the door. I'm crying my eyes out.
Yeah.
I ain't never seen nothing like that. The woman behind the door. And, they calm me down. They get me back into a state where I can talk, and we discuss what had happened. And then the next thing I know, Mom and Dad are arguing in the room. John, you're not supposed to let him. His mind takes him to dark places. And, my mom and Dad, it was just a bad dream. It was just a bad dream. But I hadn't gone to sleep yet. So that was that experience, the woman behind the door.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. And the illustration is pretty scary looking for, especially a kid, to see something like that. Definitely leave a mark on you for the rest of your life, because that's like horror movie stuff.
Well, you see horror movies, right? And you're like, oh, that's scary. But like, it's so much more frightening when in person, because it's nothing that I've ever seen special effects capable of accurately producing. And I drew it, like I drew the picture, but I was true to the image as I could have been, but it's not as scary as it was actually in person. I could never capture something like that, even in an illustration, but that's about as close to the reality of it as it was.
Yeah. What kind of experiences did your sister have in the house? Because she was a little bit younger than you, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, some time went by, and as it always does in elementary school, especially around that time of the season. I want to say it was October. I think it's October in the book, but a little bit of time went by, and the topic of Bloody Mary comes up, and everybody and their mothers, grandmothers all heard of Bloody Mary. It's supposed to be a fun urban legend that causes you to chicken out when you're having a sleepover with your friends. You go in the mirror with a candle and say it or whatever. But she'd come home. I'd never heard of it, ironically, but she came home and she was talking about it, and her friends all insisted they had ever seen it. But we didn't actually play Bloody Mary. We just discussed it in the house, and she was describing some creature or some entity, I guess. Bloody Mary is supposed to have blood coming out of her eyes, or be this bloody mess of an entity. And then nothing, for a little while. And then one night, I'm in bed, I'm asleep, and I'm woken up because I can hear howling, screaming coming from her room, which it's just adjacent to mine, right next door. Really, we share a wall. and I can hear her screaming, and then the lights are on, and mom and dad are rushing to her room, and she's screaming, and I kind of want to come and see what's going on and go back to bed. She's fine. And one thing I can tell you, being as vigilant as we were about being afraid of the things that go bump in the night, is every night before bed, we check under the beds, we make sure the closet door's closed, and my sister, unlike me, was not as afraid of the dark as I was, but had less reason to be afraid. With me having seen the woman behind the door. And at one point in the night or the other, she was woken up by sound. And the sound she woke up to was her closet door opening up. And I illustrated in the book, or rather my talented wife did, she's an architect, what the bedroom layout, the house layout was in the bedrooms. And so, you have her bed on one wall, a guest bed on the other wall, and then you have the closet at the end of the room, and the door opens up, and something, she was unable to describe it, other than that the door opened itself up. She woke up as the door was opening, and something stepped out into the room and started, I don't know if stepped is a good word, but started advancing or aggressing toward her when she screamed. And parents, moving with the speed of light that they do when a child's screaming, they were in there and the lights were on. And the only real evidence, that actually shook my mom more than my dad was, in fact, that her closet door was open. And she knew. We all know that we don't leave them open at night. Not any of us. So that was her experience with what she referred to as the Bloody Mary, and what I've come to at least hypothesize is a child's attempt to give name to something that they can't comprehend.
Yeah. Did your parents ever confess to having anything happen to them in the house?
Later on, the way it's written in the story is you hear about my story, and then you hear about my sister's story, and then the story progresses on with some other things, because there are different ways of being haunted. And then we go back and revisit it later, because I'm in my adult life in my 20s, in this restaurant with my mom, just a diner, and we're having lunch, and the topic of the house came up. And then she just kind of unloads on me everything that we missed as children that, responsible grown adults aren't going to tell their kids.
Yeah.
And I guess my mom had worked a swing shift at a diner and had come home late. And she came home from work, went into the living room from the kitchen. That was the side we used. We never used the front of the house. Plopped down on the couch, turned on the TV, and we lived near probably one of the most treacherous intersections on Grand Boulevard. There's a highway on-ramp, so there's always trucks coming on and off, and sometimes even accidents within like a stone's throw of the house. But no cars on the highway when she got home, no cars on the street. And she's sitting there watching Nick at Night or one of the other late night cable programs of that era. And she saw the blinds kind of shift a little, and she's like, no, whatever. That's not real. And then they did it again, and she said, no, and they did it again. And my mom, one of her favorite words, I'm sure she'll kill me for this, but she likes the word bullshit. And that was basically it. She was like, bullshit.
Yeah.
Prove it. And the blinds started shaking violently, like someone grabbed them and shaking them, and something akin to a finger from the top of the blinds running down these horizontal blinds to the bottom. And about that time, she's freaking out. John, wake up! John, wake up! Running in there, turning the lights on the house on. And when the trucks came by, all the blinds, they were all horizontal blinds. They'd all shaken the windows more like an earthquake, though.
Yeah.
Not like somebody had grabbed the bottom of them and was shaking them to show you, hey, I'm here.
Right.
I had it in the story originally. I don't remember, not just off the top of my head, if I kept it in there. Like I said, there's stuff I had to cut out. But from that moment forward, when she came in off any swing shift at night, house was quiet, it's dark, she would have Stormy run through the house first. She would have him come through. And I know I did cut this from the story, and I wish I hadn't, but there were a couple of times where he would come into the house, and she'd get to the living room, lights are on, and he would stop in the hallway. And there was 2 different occasions. One time he stopped in the hallway and started whining, and then kind of laid down, staring up at something she couldn't see. And he was pawing at the air like he was trying to he'd been given that bad dog feeling, and he was just trying to be cute or something. But there was something that he was interacting with that she couldn't see that scared her, and her immediate reaction, much like me telling stop it, I'm going to tell Dad, and she's like, Stormy, bad dog, stop that. It's
Yeah.
scaring her.
Yeah.
She doesn't have a rational explanation or a rational response. The next time that happened, it was a very similar circumstance. Stormy came in. By the time he reached that hallway, he'd rolled over onto his back and was whimpering and whining. And as I accounted for earlier, same thing he had done when we were in the root cellar. He just laid down, put his eyes up, and started whimpering and whining. He was a good detector for spooky things that you don't really want to deal with, but at least he gave you some idea that there was something that he was looking at, I guess.
Yeah. And did she ever explain why all of a sudden y'all couldn't go into the cellar anymore?
That explanation never came up. It was always, well, you were kids and it was dangerous down there. As a child, I could see no particular danger in there, but when I did return to the house in my early 20s, early mids, with one of my close friends, we refer to each other as brothers, but there were still no dangers that I could see even as a young adult. No low hanging beams, no low rafters. There wasn't any shelves for anything to fall out. Nothing was going to cave in. It was just one day, no one wanted to go down there, and if they didn't have to, Mom and Dad didn't go down there at all.
Yeah, and so you've mentioned a couple of times that you went back as an adult. Were there people living there when you went back to the house?
I want to say it was 2001, September 27th, 2001. No, October 27th. Sorry, October 27th, 2001. It was when I went back with my brother Mike.
Were there people in the house currently at that time when you went back living there?
Yeah, it was absolutely occupied. As it just so happened, we were talking about, we were on the highway and we were recounting things, and the topic came up that when he was a kid, he had grown up in this house that was kind of spooky. I said, "Oh, me too. I'll show it to you." And we went there and we were just parked outside in the alleyway. And the current occupant was this Hispanic woman. She was out there. And, just, "Can I help you?" I was like, "Oh, I used to live here. I was just showing a buddy of mine where I kind of grew up the first couple of years here." And she asks, unsolicited, did anything weird ever happen
Oh, wow.
when you lived here?
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, that if you want, that warrants a conversation." And she actually, we parked. She invited us in. And, man, it was like stepping back into time. And when I got there, I got like this impression, like the house was aware that I was there. And saying that out loud or writing it down in a story, I'm aware of how insane it sounds.
Yeah.
That an unmovable, immobile object is somehow aware of somebody being there. But that was the sensation I got the moment I set foot. And I don't remember if it was when I first walked back into the house or when we went down in the root cellar, but I had this deep impression on me of like, "Oh, I remember you" kind of thing going on. And it was very unsettling. Their experiences were not similar to my experiences. They had never seen a entity manifest per se, but they definitely had footsteps, including the woman's father slept on the couch in the living room. He was older than the rest of them. I assumed a grandpa or something, but he had described that he would hear children laughing and running back and forth between the living room and our den, which is by the front door, the entrance we didn't use. And she had a son and a daughter. The daughter had to be somewhere between 17 and 19. And she had told us that like when she's showering, she feels like she's being watched, and had on a number of occasions heard something breathing in her ear, both in the restroom where she would shower and also in her bedroom. And her bedroom was my sister's old bedroom where she had seen the Bloody Mary.
Yeah, that's interesting that she would just offer that information up. But I would be curious too, if I lived in this house
for sure,
and somebody,
right?
somebody who lived there previously be like, "Hey, we're having these experiences." But a lot of people also want to ignore it like it doesn't exist either.
That was kind of our family's mantra. Like, "Nope, that's not happening. That was the wind." That was the kind of stuff that my grandparents would say in their house in Redondo. It was the stuff we would say, "Nope, didn't see that." and they'd say it out loud. That's not real. Just absolute denial. But I think, we had touched earlier on how like we get involved in these because we want to prove or justify or rationalize that these things did happen. And I think when you're in a place like the house on West Grand, someone's like, "Oh yeah, I used to live here." The first words out of my mouth would probably have been in her shoes. Did anything ever happen while you were here?
Yeah.
And not hoping for, yeah, absolutely. Actually hoping for, no. Then it's all in your imagination. You're good.
Yeah.
You want the opposite of confirmation if something's terrifying you or scaring you. But all of them, with the exception of the son who claimed that he had never experienced anything, all of them had just an uncomfortable sensation just being in the house. Some of them had direct experiences, like the daughter with something that she couldn't see breathing in her ear. But overall, just they weren't particularly happy there. And within a couple years, they had already moved out by the time I went back to the house again.
Yeah. Do you think that the house, because I know a lot of people in these situations, they talk about people having different moods in the house and the house affecting them that way. And then when they leave, the mood completely changes or it changes a person. Do you think that had any effect on your family?
Well, I mean, I do. I think that, when I was growing up, because all the events in this house are all related to how they affected my life, both the haunting itself and the familial turmoil.
Yeah.
And I think that, my folks were inevitably going to just go their separate ways eventually. But there was a lot of negativity just trapped in that place, man. Those walls, that whatever that place had seen, whatever had gone on in that old place just seemed to collect there. And, people were quicker to anger. The tempers were quicker to rise. I'd spill milk and my dad would disproportionately scream about a glass of spilled milk, literally crying over spilled milk.
Yeah.
And he out of all of us, I always recollect and think on that, it seemed to be affected the most by it. It got pretty dark living there, and it became, something that went from a hopeful place for new beginnings to a hopeless place where you just wanted it to stop. And even as a kid, the silver lining in that cloud became fewer, lesser, and far between. That we were actually happy being there. We had a pretty stable life, financially speaking. Like I said, he was working in the aerospace engineer. He was himself, or aerospace industry. He was himself an aerospace engineer. It's not like we were hurting for the amenities. It was just that everything was beginning to collapse down around us. And I want to say, yeah, that's the house. I don't know. I believe that it had something to do with it, that it just kind of sped along the inevitable.
Yeah. Yeah. And in those situations, I wonder if it's the actual paranormal itself that's affecting the people, or it's the fact that, like, as parents, because and you talk about this in the book a little bit, and it made a lot of sense to me. We always think about our parents as being older and have their shit together and that type of stuff. But when we're kids, our parents are essentially kids too, and they're kind of figuring things out, in their 20s. And so it makes me think, okay, well, was it because they didn't know how to deal with the situation, so it caused them to have the anxiety of, I have to deal with this shit on top of normal life stuff going on?
Oh, for sure.
And the denial of, like, I don't want to believe in this, but also the I don't know, the fear of not knowing how to protect your family either.
Well, right, because this isn't something that, this is not an intruder that you can, beat up or shoot or arrest or put down. This is something immaterial, and you've already gone through, as parents, you've gone through marital problems. You're just trying to put things back together, and like you said, oh shit, now we've got this too.
Yeah.
Now, and this is something that we can't control. It cannot be reasoned with, or it cannot. It has no rational desire to behave itself, and we have two frightened children with us on top of that. On top of our marital woes, on top of everything else that's already going around in our lives. And I think that, I think that it was both paranormal and also, just the very human nature, the human reaction to all of these things building up at one time and culminating in something that was going to be catastrophic for our family.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know for the audience, we're kind of jumping around on the timeline here, but So you also, even after going in 2001 and talking to that family, you had some more dealings with other people who lived there afterwards.
Um, so I told you about going back there in 2001, and then after that, I had gone out and gotten this tattoo. My mom had taken me to the parlor, actually, which shocked me because she was historically vehemently anti-tattoo, but went and got this tattoo, and afterward, I asked her if she could drop by there, and that was when I discovered, because it wasn't too long after the first time that no one was living there, no one at all. The house had gone up for sale and into escrow at some point or another, and so did something I probably shouldn't have done, but I decided I was going to go look inside the garage, and there were these Blue Angels bumper stickers on the wall that my dad had put on there back in '89 when we first moved in. He was a former sailor himself and a huge fan of the Blue Angels. And there was a big crack running through the wall, and the stickers had been cracked in half. And I had more of a metaphoric thing for me that that the past. I kind of like, oh, okay, cool. The past is dead. This is done. Time to move on.
Yeah.
But these experiences, especially the one in 2001, we had formed the Paranormal and Research Development. We didn't have a society moniker attached yet. So later down the line, we were doing a bunch of things, and there were two hot spots in my hometown in Corona that came up, and one happened to be the house. And there was a kind of acting by proxy. There was this lady named Margie May, I think I call her in the book. That wasn't her real name, but she was vehemently against me attempting to contact the owner. She was adamant that she had taken care of the problem, she said. That the new owners were turning this into a business, and while the owner's wife was very upset by whatever was going on in the house, this lady assured me, I walked through with sage and I cleansed the house and no more could come of it. Leave them alone. I never got to directly interact with the new owners of the property, who are currently the owners of the property itself as well. And sometime, oh gosh, that was in the mid 2000s too. Sometime way down the road, around 2008, almost going into 2009, I had actually gotten an email from her, and I mean, like all caps, kind of panicking. Is like, hey, it started up again. The doctor has become inexplicably ill. His wife is afraid. Does this place usually act up in the autumn? One of the first people to tell people that I don't know that there's such thing as like seasonal hauntings, like there's seasonal allergies.
Right.
The concept of that is so absurd to me. I just didn't really bother to write her back other than I don't know, good luck. I didn't really communicate with her after that because I was living in another city now in Central California. It was no longer my problem.
Right.
And that was really the last interaction with anybody I had regarding the house.
Did you ever find out any, because as an investigator for me, I go to the history of the property or the house. Did you ever dig into that and find out why the place may be haunted or why some of these entities are there?
Oh, for sure. I attempted on a number of occasions, like in the early 2000s, we had, when I first went back in 2001, you got to consider like we had just gotten away from dial-up and it was still out there.
Yeah.
Right. The internet had gone from being AOL to just being like this self-contained thing that it is. And we hadn't gotten remotely any of the databases that we have now. So I spent a lot of time in the historic district of the library, attempting to hit up the county recorder for anything at all on the property. And there was nothing at that time other than that it was an American craftsman home, architecture style, built in the early 1900s. I want to say it was like 1910, I think it was. And that was the only information. I have no blueprints, anything like that. And then I tried again just while I was writing this book. I didn't want to spend the money, but I went ahead and bought something, for allegedly that could give you the complete history of the property, would have all the information on it that you could need because it gives you access due to freedom of information that we didn't really have back then. And again, American craftsman home built in 1910. And that was it. That's all that there is on the house. You can go on Zillow and it'll give you a complete list of like anyone who's ever lived there, but that's about. I mean, and when I say anyone who's ever lived there, I mean up to the point where like my family moved in.
Yeah.
It doesn't show the owners prior to our occupation of the property. Uh, it doesn't show who first lived in the house. It's something built in 1910 or whatever year it was. I still want to say 1910. Somebody would have lived there. It didn't just sit there until 1989. There were occupants.
Right.
And did come to find out though, the house had a weird reputation in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I would imagine word would get around.
Oh, for sure. I mean, well, just in the 1950s, it had apparently which by the way at the time must have been really difficult for them. They had a mixed race couple there, and they apparently weren't particularly happy there either, according to one of my friends from the old neighborhood. And I guess that house was known as the bad house at the time. Nobody goes to that house.
Wow.
We don't visit the house. If we're gonna hang out with neighbors, we're not hanging out there. They can come over here. That type of thing. They didn't want to be near the house.
Yeah.
And in recounting it, I have a friend in the book. I named him. He signed a waiver on it. His name Robert Vargas. I owe a great deal of thanks to him specifically because he helped fill in some blanks about the history of the house, because his family had been in that neighborhood since before the 50s. And finding out that was the bad house. Nobody goes there. They don't know the history of the house. They don't know really who lived there before the 50s. They don't have any information any more than anyone else did. It was, as far as the historical context goes for the house on West Grand, it wasn't there, then it was there, then some people lived there, and then people were aware of it suddenly around the
50s. Yeah, that's interesting.
It's weird, right?
Yeah. Especially not to, you got to think I would just think with horrible things going on and seeing horrible things like that y'all have seen and experienced, if it was just little old granny who died in there, I don't think little old granny, in my experience of investigating, little old granny who died in the house is not going to haunt you like that. It tends to be like more traumatic murders or suicides or, horrific things like that, in the environment. Not, like I said, not somebody who lived there until the end of their life.
Yeah, like extreme violence,
Yeah.
And, well, one of the things that I, it took me growing up into, a functioning adult, like being able to think rationally, to realize, how much I don't know about the paranormal, how much I don't know about hauntings, how much I thought, my whole life I thought, well, I experienced this, so therefore I'm an expert on the matter, and that was not the case.
Yeah.
But my understanding is, at least according to the accepted lore, is, if a ghost is the spirit or soul or energy of a person who died, if that is the case, then if they're going to look like anything at all, they're going to look like they did as that person. What they're not going to look like is somebody with cavernous eyes and a rotting face, because that's not how they look when they died.
Right.
That almost shows, and being somebody in the paranormal, I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of intelligent hauntings versus non-intelligent hauntings.
Yeah.
The difference between an intelligent entity and a poltergeist, right?
Yeah.
Something that specifically appears as something else to frighten you would denote, to me at least, an incredible amount of intelligence and malicious, a malicious will to inflict that horror upon another person.
Right.
Definitely not little old granny.
Yeah, and one of the things I subscribe to as well, especially when people ask me about demons and malicious things, I tell them, and this has been my motto for a long time: if you're an asshole in life, probably gonna be an asshole in death. And so it very well could be an asshole spirit that was just somebody that doesn't want you in the house because they think it's still theirs, and they're playing on your fears to get you and your family out.
Oh, very potentially. I mean, I comment in the house repeatedly, and this is, the house hated us, and I refer to the house only because whatever's in there, I don't know what it is. I don't know its name, and I have to presume that anything that we can't see that's immaterial, like the first lesson we learned when we're little kids, don't talk to strangers.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want to attempt to communicate with this thing, but also even if I did, I can't be sure it's not lying. So I looking at it externally now, very well could be. I myself and my entire family, we're Christians, and I subscribe more to the demon side. But when I approach paranormal investigation, I do it with a 100% like objective stance, where I don't allow my views on my faith to interact with what I'm investigating at the time. So I'm not like some of those ghost hunting reality shows where he's coming in with a Bible and a priest and everything's a demon
Right.
and
Right.
everything's haunted and we're going to exorcise it now. I come in looking analytically at this, and I'm not one of the. I am, stating for the record, I am in fact a very ardent and strong believer of hauntings. I am not a blind believer of hauntings.
Yeah.
I'm not quick to jump on board and say, oh look, someone showed me a picture on Facebook in a paranormal group. What do you guys see in this picture? And well, the wood grain looks like a face, and
Yeah.
well, well, or I took a big rip off of my hookah, and look, I took a picture, and I could see ghosts in the smoke.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
only in the last decade have I heard people actually using the word pareidolia, apophenia, things like that. I've come to believe, and I'm trying not to get off topic, but I've just come to believe that when it comes to the afterlife, including myself and most people that I know, I have never met an expert, even though it's a moniker. You say, Joe Schmo, expert on the afterlife. Yeah, I don't know how, because to be an expert, you need like 10,000 hours, and you have to have gone there and come back to let us know exactly how these things are working. And
Right.
my understanding is it's a one-way trip.
Yeah. And I'm with you on that. And I think it's ridiculous when they do that on TV. And people, it gives that misnomer to people that there are experts. And you get into that in the book as well about, it's not something that's scientific. It's not something that we can recreate on demand. And so therefore
Correct.
You can't be an expert if you can't recreate it and have it happen when you want and call this phenomenon up. And even prove that it exists, because we can't even prove, that it exists. It's more of a conjecture and a belief and very subjective, but also as an investigator for 20 years and as somebody who's experienced lots and lots of things that I can't explain. And I tend to be a skeptical believer is what I call myself, because I will throw out evidence before I ever put it out there, if I can explain it in any way. And I think that's how you have to be as well when you're investigating. And even looking back at like things that happened to me when I was a kid, kind of looking at it through those that skeptical lens to say, okay, well, was it just because I was a kid and I was naive that I think this was paranormal, or was this actually unexplainable?
Well, and absolutely right. And I have a very similar approach. We never shut our doors. My paranormal group, which we call ourselves currently the Northern Nevada Paranormal Research and Development Society. And we've actually come away from doing things like, an overnight at the Washoe Club in Virginia City, because it doesn't lend to anything really other than kind of, I don't know if you're familiar with the term legend tripping.
Yeah.
It just kind of lends to that. I'm going out for a thrill. I'm going to spend the night in a haunted hotel, and I'm going to bring my audio recorder and my camera and see what I can see, and we'll get some EVP. And unfortunately, none of that is reliable evidence. We as a group have come away from that, saying, okay, we'll go. We get calls from private parties. Yeah, we'll come investigate your home. We'll tell you what we think. We don't do exorcisms. We don't know what it is, and we're not going to attempt to talk to it, but we'll let you know if we think something's there.
Right.
And that's about the extent of it, because we don't know, and because of the damage that the early American spiritualism did when it came to America with the seances, and it caused this uproar of pseudoscience. I see too many people clinging on to that, even though its history is marred by disreputable behavior.
Right.
The ideas that were practiced themselves were what was under trial, not the concept of spiritualism itself. Just it boggles my mind, because I can't apply that to anything, because it seems to give you that confirmation, that cognitive and confirmation bias. All right, if I use these techniques, it'll prove that something's there. If you go looking for something and you're intent on finding it, you will find it.
Exactly. Yeah. And my motto over the years has become, we don't investigate hauntings, we investigate stories of a haunting. And
yes.
Yeah, because
wow, yes.
Yeah, because until I experience it or find some sort of evidence that's irrefutable, then I don't, it could be mental health, or it could be people not understanding, banging in the walls as their pipes, or, it could be something that's explainable. And even though I don't ever throw anybody's stories out because that really happened to them and had some sort of emotional effect on them, I can't sit there and tell you, oh yeah, that was a spirit. Your house is haunted, because I wasn't there. I don't know the conditions and all that. But like I said, at the same time, we go and investigate stories of haunting. And when you go into like a private home, I think your approach is amazing. Is you're going in to basically let these people know you're not crazy. And that's what a lot of people just want, is to know that they're not making shit up, and they're not crazy. And sometimes there are normal explanations. I've gone and done residential cases where there are normal explanations for things. And once you explain to them, people, they understand it, and it kind of calms their fears that their kids aren't in danger and they're not in danger. It helps kind of get them a rational explanation for some things. And then there are some things that, we can't explain, but we can offer and say, maybe this was this or that, or, things like that. And I think that's all it takes with a lot of people, is just calming those fears.
And well, that's a huge part of it. And I think some of it is, everybody who researches or invests their time into paranormal investigation, this is a rough industry, because we don't have a canonical text on how to operate,
right,
but we all do have our separate reasons. You can have 12 believers in one room, and all of them have a different reason why they're doing what they're doing. And you brought it up, when you're going into a private residence, and parents just want to be sure their kids are okay. I can relate to that, because I wish somebody would come in and told us, hey, you're not crazy.
Yeah.
We have gone a lot deeper into the R&D, and I won't go too into it, because I know that's not the topic of this podcast right now, but we've gone into a lot of R&D into finding alternate means of explanation that are still potential possibilities, like infrasonic sound. I think it's like 19 hertz.
Yeah.
Things like that can cause the human eye to vibrate and hallucinate, and it also creates intense emotions of fear and panic. And we go in looking for things like that first. Are there copper pipes in your house? Do they bang around? How's your plumbing? What's the geological survey look like out here? If we could pull it up. Just there's weird things that can cause mimic a haunted behavior. Things that like pressurized salt rock underground can produce false EMF readings. All of the things that we're looking for. My group was always about your peace of mind. That's what we're here for. We're here for your peace of mind. We can't necessarily confirm something, but we're going to let you know we don't think you're crazy.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's great that you come from a as horrific as it was for you growing up in that environment. I think it makes you better at what you do now, because you understand these people and these families and what they're going through, because you came from a similar experience. And I think that helps a lot with families too, just to have somebody to commiserate with and say, hey, I had something, similar when I was growing up. When I was a kid, my parents didn't know how to deal with it, and I think that helps families a lot. And we need teams like yours out there. I don't do private investigations anymore. It's just a lot to do, but we need teams like yours out there who are doing it in a way that doesn't hurt the families, because there are plenty of teams out there, unfortunately, who go in and they make a mess of what it is. And then teams like yours and other teams I know, like my buddy John Curley's, y'all have to go in and clean it up.
Oh, for sure. There's so much responsibility on our shoulders, right? We're coming in here to reassure someone. And, if I thought for a minute, that something was haunted, I would tell them, I can't prove this, but I think you might have something here. The first question I always ask, do you want your home to be haunted?
Yeah.
And so far, the answer has always been, well, no.
Yeah.
You'd have to be crazy to want that. And I'm a firm agreement with them on that. You would have to be crazy to want it. But the problem is there's a lot of these groups who come in, and the first words out of their mouth are, your house is haunted, it's a demon, get a priest or move.
Right.
They create this horror for these people who are already afraid and who are already questioning things. And it's irresponsible. And I don't want to call it an industry, because it's not, but for lack of a better word, in paranormal investigation, in that industry, the responsibility is on the investigator not to create panic.
Yeah.
And not to make definitive statements that we don't have proof,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there needs to be resources like your team out there and other teams across the country to help these people, private investigations. Then you need to go to a team who does them and does them properly and learn how to do them and how to handle them, instead of just jumping in after your team's been together for a year and you don't know what you're doing.
and I agree with that. One of the things that I saw, I mean, you see the reality TV shows, man. It is literally a circus sideshow. It's
Yeah.
for entertainment value more than anything. And unfortunately, these private parties, they think, well, that's what this is. That,
Yeah.
and if I ask someone to come and investigate, they're going to bring in their equipment. I'm going to end up on YouTube, and we came up with the perspective, well, these people are private residences. They're private. Let's not make this into a spectacle. Let's not turn it into a sideshow. This is something that bothers someone else. Let's not make it their life's pain and fear. Entertainment for the masses who are going to turn around and say that was fun, but it's fake anyway.
Right.
And then completely disregard and dismiss these people's plight, whether it's real or imagined. It's scaring them, and it's a good place to start. Is just to try to bring that peace of mind.
Yeah.
That's just my sense. I didn't want to get too far off topic, but I did want to address that because you asked,
Yeah.
how did you get wrapped up into it? Well, it was West Grand, and it ended up being the PRD and then the PRDS, and it started with the West Grand, and it kind of ends there too. It all comes back to that for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just like I told you in the beginning, I love to have a conversation, see where it goes, especially with other investigators, and because I always learn something. I've been doing this for a long time, but I can always learn from other investigators, and also like to talk to like-minded people like yourself that were on the same page with how we investigate, and and things like that. And I think there's more and more of us. I think a lot of the bullshit is going away. I think people are finally starting to see the circus sideshow with ghost adventures and ghost hunters and things like that as being just entertainment. I think in the past few years, I've kind of seen, doing the podcast here, I've kind of seen a swing, especially in social media with, like you mentioned earlier, people posting, a piece of wood and they're seeing a face in it. I've seen a lot more people comment now that, no, that's just pareidolia, or people putting up orbs, and people are like, no, that's just a lens flare. And I've seen a huge swing in that, instead of people just agreeing with them, of people not being nasty, but being more educational and saying, no, that's not paranormal. I'm sorry that you want it to be, but it's not.
Well, and I see the reaction of that. Like one of the big, we have an operations manual for the PRDS. All the ways we handle things, we have prescribed answers to questions, so that people aren't getting upset when we're saying, well, no, that's not what it is. We don't just say no, which is there's a lot of people out there who just like to be like, nope, on the social media. It's not enough just to say no. Paranormal investigation is kind of a jack of all trades thing. Is you got orbs? Well, that's silica dust or moisture in the air, and here's why it's silica dust or moisture. Moisture orbs tend to be colorful. Silica dust looks like a little gray ball. In both cases, you've got backscatter. It's a common term used in photography.
Right.
When there's too much dust or moisture in the air, you get those orbs. That's backscatter. This is not ghosts, gathering in the hundreds of millions. Other questions, like they come up on social media. You see a picture come up, and it's in the middle of a cornfield. And the first question I ask before anything else is, well, why did you take that picture?
Yeah.
Especially if they're like, well, I didn't see anything until after I developed it or after I went home. But yeah, but why did you take the picture? What prompted you to snap that shot of that, that dank, dark room in that house? If you going in there for an investigation, that's great, but why that picture specifically? And they become, it's the rule of challenged belief. It's something we deal with in the PRDS. When you challenge a person's belief, they become hostile.
Yeah.
Immediately hostile. And they ask it in the why are you in this group? Why are you in our social media group if you're not a believer? And it's not about disbelief, but if everything is paranormal, nothing's paranormal. It's all just normal.
Right.
And we're not there yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming on today. I really enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed the book. I love how you wrote the book because it's not just a haunting. It's not just about a haunted house. It's about your life and kind of a what's the term I'm looking for? Like a person of interest story about how it affected your life, but also how your life affected it at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate you for having me on the show. I'd like to think of it as a autobiographical horror, but coming of age. But, hauntings, like I said earlier on when we first began, hauntings are more than just ghosts. There are haunted people. I do have to thank Madhouse Books for publishing me. I didn't get a chance to go on that with you if you got a second.
Yeah.
I have a good friend named Ashley. She has her own little indie publishing house called Madhouse Books. And I asked her, the story was originally only 11,000 words long, and I asked her to proofread it, and then she proofreads it and comes back to me. She says, "This is gold. This is awesome. Can you make it, 60,000 words, 65,000 words? I want to publish this." And I want to point out, she had told me prior to the West Grand Haunting, Madhouse Books only did anthologies. We kind of did a groundbreaking thing with just publishing a full-length novel on my part. I'm extremely grateful to her, grateful to, again, Robert Vargas for his help with the West Grand Haunting, my wife for doing the architectural diagram in the story, and my mom and my sister for providing some information to fill the holes in those gaps in the story that I didn't know about.
Yeah, and I'd tell my audience, definitely go out and pick up a copy. I know it's available on Amazon and Kindle. Is it available anywhere else?
Amazon, Kindle, Walmart, Barnes and Noble. Most major online retailers will have it. There's also a number of smaller websites and book sites that I can't remember their names, but they hold it too. A Google search of the West Grand Haunting by Michael Oka would let you know all the sellers. I highly recommend Amazon, the most reliable and speedy way for it to get there. I am not an affiliate of Amazon. I'm just stating a fact.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Kindle, so that's usually how I read my books. It's just easy and quick and
oh, for sure.
Yeah. But everybody go check out the West Grand Haunting by Michael Oka. And it's been my pleasure today to chat with you.
Oh, an absolute honor too. It was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun talking to you on your show, and look forward to hearing it.
Yeah, and I'll have to have you on again to talk about cases and things like that, since we got into the weeds there off the topic of the book. But all right, everybody, y'all stay safe out there. Have a good day. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to The Unseen Paranormal. Join me next Wednesday with a brand new guest, and please rate, review, share, and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. This helps more people discover the show. You can connect with me over on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or join us in the Unseen Paranormal Lounge group on Facebook. Until next time, remember, some of the scariest things are unseen. You have come to the end of the line.